I had finished breakfast and was getting ready to go to the newspaper when it happened. There was a flash from the indoor wires as if lightning had struck. I didn't hear any sound. How shall I say? The world around me turned bright white, and I was momentarily blinded as if a magnesium light had lit up in front of my eyes. Immediately after that, the blast came. I was bare from the waist up, and the blast was so intense it felt like hundreds of needles were stapling me all at once. The blast grew large holes in the walls of the first and second floor. I could barely see the room because of all the dirt. I pulled my camera and the clothes issued by the military headquarters out from under the mound of the debris, and I got dressed. I thought I would go to either the newspaper or to the headquarters. That was about 40 minutes after the blast. Near the Miyuki Bridge, there was a police box. Most of the victims who had gathered there were junior high school girls from the Hiroshima Girls Business School and the Hiroshima Junior High School No. 1. They had been mobilized to evacuate buildings and were outside when the bomb fell. Having been directly exposed to the heat rays, they were covered with blisters the size of balls on their backs, their faces, their shoulders, and their arms. The blisters were starting to burst open, and their skin hung down like rugs. Some of the children even have burns on the soles of their feet. They'd lost their shoes and had run barefoot through the burning fire. When I saw this, I thought I would take a picture, and I picked up my camera, but I couldn't push the shutter because the sight was so pathetic. Even though I too was a victim of the same bomb, I only had minor injuries from glass fragments, whereas these people were dying. It was such a cruel sight that I couldn't bring myself to press the shutter. Perhaps I hesitated there for about 20 minutes, but I finally summoned up the courage to take one picture. Then I moved 4 or 5 meters forward to take the second picture, and even today I clearly remember how the viewfinder was clouded over with my tears. I felt that everyone was looking at me and thinking angrily, "He's taking our picture and will bring us no help at all." Still, I had to press the shutter, so I hardened my heart and finally I took the second shot. Those people must have thought me duly cold-hearted. Then I saw a burned streetcar which had just turned the corner at Kamiya-cho. There were passengers still in the car. I put my foot onto the steps of the car and I looked inside. There were perhaps 15 or 16 people in front of the car. They lay dead, one on top of another. Kamiya-cho was very close to the hypocenter, about 200 meters away. The passengers had stripped them of all their clothes. They saw that when you are terrified, you tremble and your hair stands on end. And I felt just this tremble when I saw this scene. I stepped down to take a picture and I put my hand on my camera. But I felt so sorry for these dead and naked people whose photo would be left to posterity that I couldn't take the shot. And also in those days, we weren't allowed to publish the photographs of corpses in the newspapers. After that, I walked around. I walked through the section of town which had been hit hardest. I walked for close to 3 hours, but I couldn't take even one picture of that central area. There were other cameramen in the army shipping group and also at the newspapers as well, but the fact that not a single one of them was able to take pictures seems to indicate just how brutal the bombing actually was. I don't pride myself on it, but it's a small consolation that I was able to take at least 5 pictures. During the war, air raids took place practically every night, and after the war began, there were many food shortages. Those of us who experienced all these hardships, we hope that such suffering will never be experienced again by our children and our grandchildren. Not only our children and grandchildren, but all future generations should not have to go through this tragedy. That is why I want people to listen to our testimonies and to choose the right path, the path which leads to peace. This is a testimony by Yoshito Matsushige, who is a Hiroshima survivor and the only photographer who was able to capture an immediate first-hand photographic historical account of the destruction of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima on August 6th, 1945. So welcome to the second part of this podcast series on our trip to Japan. And we are starting in a place where round about 140,000 lives ended in the year 1945. On August 6th, 1945, the Enola Gay took flight, and after 6 hours of flight time, roundabout, reached the Hiroshima area. And it released the first of 2 atomic bombs which were going to be sent down onto Japanese soil by the United States Army. And we went to see, like everybody who goes to Hiroshima, we went to see the Peace Memorial and the park, which have been built in the place where the atomic bomb struck. Now, in those days, Hiroshima, and even today, it's called the City of Rivers because it's built in a delta of several rivers. And way back when, in 1945, the central part of Hiroshima was on the main island in this delta. And it was where the bomb fell. Now, when we say that the bomb fell, it's a little bit different from what I had thought had happened, because while I knew that an atomic bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima, I didn't really know much about the details. Basically, what happened was the Enola Gay released an atomic bomb called Little Boy, which contained about 64 kilograms of uranium-235. And it fell from about 9,400 meters above sea level. And it detonated, not on the ground, but about 580 meters above ground. So that's why there was no atomic crater where the bomb exploded, but rather everything in the area underneath and within a certain radius of the so-called hypocenter, of course hypo meaning below, was flattened. And the reason was because there was this huge blast, this shock wave, but then of course there was fire. And when they decided to, when the United States decided that they were going to use the atomic bomb in Japan, they made a couple of decisions based on where they should drop it. And different cities were taken into consideration based on the topography of the cities in order to ensure that they would do the most damage, which of course, you know, being now very, let's say, very objective, does make sense. If you are going to use a weapon on an enemy, you want to do it in such a way that it inflicts the most damage to ensure that you reach your goals, which of course were that they wanted the Japanese Empire to capitulate. And so they looked at different options, and they considered different, let's say, different possible targets. And they decided that Kyoto was one possibility. They also decided that Hiroshima was one possibility. They did not, as a matter of fact, put Nagasaki on the list of possible targets, at least not to begin with. And the reason, or one of the reasons how they chose these different targets were that the target was larger than 4.8 kilometers in diameter, and it should be in a large city. The blast wave would create effective damage. And also from a topological point of view, it was good if the city that was going to be bombed was basically surrounded by mountains. Now, those of you who know a little bit about the topography of Japan will know that Honshu, which is the main island, is divided into a northern part and a southern part. And between these two parts is a very high mountain range. Also, Mount Fuji is there. And in the southern half of this part of the island, that's where the big cities are: Tokyo, Osaka, Yokohama, Kyoto, Hiroshima as well. And Hiroshima itself is basically in a delta, like I said, but nestled in kind of like a horseshoe-shaped mountain range. So basically, when you bomb this, while it will flatten everything and burn or a lot of the buildings to the ground, it will also be contained. So that was one very, very good reason to choose Hiroshima. So basically, as it is formulated on Wikipedia, there are adjacent hills which are likely to produce a focusing effect which would considerably increase the blast damage. Due to the rivers, it is not a good incendiary target, which is also why Hiroshima wasn't part of the incendiary bombing campaign that, for example, struck Tokyo, because it just wouldn't burn as well. So essentially, what was the industrial, but also the residential center of Hiroshima was destroyed on that day. And the people who did die mainly died of fire damage. Some of them definitely must have died from the blast as well, but it was mainly the fire. Some say when we went to the museum, it basically said that the heat was about 3,900 degrees Celsius. Almost everything was destroyed. When you go to the Memorial Museum, and we definitely recommend that you do, you will see pictures before and after, which are very interesting, because I didn't really have any concept of what Hiroshima was like before the blast and what had been in this area that is now a huge, huge park of around 120,000 square meters. Well, basically, it was the center, the center of Hiroshima, and it was completely destroyed, except for a couple of buildings here or there, or a couple of structures here or there. Sometimes, basically, a tall chimney would still remain, but everything else was destroyed. And when you go and visit the place today, I mean, Hiroshima itself is now a vibrant city again. It's close to, I want to say, 1 million people. And it is a really modern city, of course, because once the bomb had fallen, very soon afterwards, of course, the war ended in the Pacific Theater. And then people in Hiroshima started to rebuild. But very soon they decided that the place, the hypocenter, and the place that the center of the blast would not be rebuilt upon, but they would turn this into a peace memorial, which you can still see today. And as you're listening to this, and if you're watching this, you will also see pictures of Hiroshima's peace memorial, which we took when we were there. When you visit the place today, first of all, lots of people are wondering, is it safe? Because, I mean, an atomic bomb exploded there. In 1986, Chernobyl exploded. You can't go there because of the radiation. Is it safe? Yes, the answer is it's perfectly safe, because the bomb, as I said, exploded 580 meters above ground. And basically all of the radiation went up into the atmosphere. Some people, of course, on the day were radiated, and they died later of, let's say, leukemia and radiation-related illnesses. But they started measuring the radiation on the ground as of day one. And even a couple of days, let's say a week after the bomb had fallen, the radiation levels were back to normal. However, something happened afterwards, and that was called black rain. It happened on the day, and it happened up until the 1950s, early 1950s. Black rain in the greater Hiroshima area fell. And black rain is essentially rain that contains the ash from the blast, which was still in the atmosphere in 1953, and it comes down as rain, and that is radioactive to a certain degree. But today it is perfectly fine, and you can go there, and it is absolutely safe to visit. It is also a very somber place when you go there. We went there on our first day in Hiroshima after we traveled over on the Shinkansen. So we arrived, I want to say, around noon. We went to the hotel, dropped off our luggage, and then we went to, because the hotel happened to be like within easy walking distance of the memorial park. And we went for a walk there. And of course, as I said, it gets dark quite early. And so we were also there at night. And it is a very beautiful place. The park looks gorgeous. The building that houses the museum is timeless in its architectural beauty. The memorial pieces themselves, the flame, etc., are beautifully done. And we were wondering, if we didn't know what had happened, how would this park feel? Because it feels very quiet, very serene, but also because we know what happened there, it feels very somber. It is, like I said, 120 square meters, so there are plenty of visitors there, but you will never feel it's crowded simply because the area is so big. And you can go for very relaxing walks in there, and you can also see the bridge which they targeted. It's been, I want to say, rebuilt. There are still parts of the bridge pillars where basically the pillars, they look like those typical Japanese lanterns, but the top part of the pillar had just been put on the main pillar. So when the bomb exploded, the pillars didn't crumble, but the tops were shifted to the side. So and there's one still there that you can see, and it looks it looks, I mean, when you look at it, it looks a little bit funny because it looks like it's out of kilter, which it is. But when you think about it, the blast and the wave, the shock wave, was so massive that it actually managed to move the stones without actually destroying them. That's something that I find absolutely incredible, that it didn't just collapse. The city today, like I said, is well worth a visit. There is lots more to do. When we went there, we of course visited the museum as well. And by the way, you can get online tickets, which means that you don't have to stand in line. And we recommend that you do it, not because it's cheaper, but because sometimes they come in with buses. Schools come in, but also tourists come in on buses. And basically then you would have to wait in line for a long time. But if you actually buy your ticket online, and you can do it on the day that you want to go or the day before you want to go, it's a lot easier to go in there. One could give you a trigger warning about going into that museum. I am not going to do it because I believe it's important that we as the human race need to face what we are able to do and what we have done. I believe that when the bomb exploded, the human race fell from grace and stepped over a line that we should have never stepped over. The actual exhibition is both graphical, but also, and I want to stress that, it is in no way pornographic. This is not victim porn or anything like it. It is absolutely factual and historical. And it's also kept up to date. The most recent piece of information that they added was from 2023. So we went there in 2024, so they're really up to date. They even include the information that Russia has now decided not to leave the worldwide nuclear disarmament discussions. Of course, now with the war in Ukraine, they keep threatening that they will throw the bomb, they're all crazy. But anyway, it is being kept up to date. You see a lot of eyewitness accounts as well, like the one that I read to you. There's also artifacts that they recovered from the debris. There are very few pictures, simply because people didn't take any pictures. I just read you the account of a professional photographer who was so devastated by what he saw that he couldn't even take any pictures. But people drew stuff. So survivors later on sat down and drew their impressions. So it's just a must see, in my opinion. And we recommend that you go there. You can also see the A-bomb dome. That is a very iconic building, which is on the other side of the river, so it's not on the main island. And it is it used to be the Industrial Promotion Hall. So it was basically a huge building where there were industry. It's like an industrial museum, or that's what I got it. So you could go there and, you could see the latest and greatest things in industrial innovation. And this building was only partially destroyed. And it's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And you can actually see it. And at night it's illuminated. And it is just... You can't go inside because obviously it is unsafe because it is a ruin. They've stabilized it and it's been there since 1945 in its current state, but you can't really go inside, but you don't really need to. It's just looking at it that will bring home the weirdness of the incident, of course, as well, because the building still stands in parts. And there are still ceremonies that are held every year on the anniversary of the bomb. And basically, Hiroshima is very much committed to peace and to, like the cause to ban atomic bombs worldwide. And you can also find out all about this in the museum. The museum is open between 7:30 in the morning and 1900 hours at night, depending on the time of year. In August, it's also a little bit longer. It is extremely well designed, and the building itself is something that I thought was very beautifully done. And the museum itself is crowded because people just go there, they flock to it, they want to see it, which is important. But it also meant that for us, it was sometimes a bit difficult to actually see the exhibits because there were just so many people. You can get audio commentary. For some reason, we weren't able to get it on the day, but it seems like you can book it sometimes and sometimes you can't. I don't know what this is based on, but the inscriptions are both in English and Japanese. So if you speak English, you will be able to read and get all of the information. Now, that is what we did in Hiroshima. The second part of our trip to the area took us to Miyajima island, or also known as Itsukushima, and it is basically famous for its floating torii. So sometimes you will even find the floating torii as an image on guidebooks. And we went there by boat. You have to go by boat, or you can walk when the tide is low. You can actually apparently walk from the mainland to the island. We didn't do that. We took the boat, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. So in order to get to Miyajima Island, you, like I said, can apparently walk. We didn't verify if you really could. I really didn't feel like this was an option, but then again, we never saw the tide completely gone, so there was always water there when we were there. There was always a boat when we were there. But there are three main approaches by boat. You can either take a Hiroshima cruise to the island, and the boats leave very close to the atomic dome. Then you can also take a ferry from Hiroshima port, or you can also take the tram to another port on the southern coast near Hiroshima. I think the tram ride is about 30 minutes or so. And then there's a 10-minute ferry, which you can also use for your car, and it's completely operated by JR. So if you, by Japanese rail, so if you have a Shuka card, you can use it on this particular ferry as well. So we did it in two ways. So in the morning, we took the cruise from the Atomic Dome. It's about a 45-minute ride, and it was really, really lovely. And it took us to the main port of Miyajima Island. And of course, from there, you can see the floating torii. And on our way back, we took the JR ferry and then the tram. So basically, the island itself is like many parts of Japan, very, very mountainous. So you have a small stretch of land that is at sea level or a little bit above where people live. And then you have very tall mountains. Well, tall, I mean, a couple of 100 meters, we're not talking the Alps here. But, since you're coming from sea level and since the terrain is really rugged, it is quite tall and quite steep. The island itself has a very long history as a holy site of Shinto. Now, Shinto is Japan's original animistic religion today, and most Japanese say that they are Shinto, but also that they are Buddhist, because Buddhism, of course, arrived in Japan, and you also have its Japanese version. And essentially, since the 6th century AD, Miyajima has been home to shrines and temples, and is still to this day a living shrine environment. And by living shrine, I want to indicate that Shintoism and Buddhism are very much alive and kicking today in Japan. Unlike, for example, in Germany, where most people may be Christians but don't really practice. When you go to a Japanese shrine or temple, you will definitely see worshippers there, and I want you to be very mindful of that. They're worshippers of all ages, young to very old, and they will go to the shrine or the temple depending on if they want to pray to the Buddha, or if they want to pray to a kami, i.e. a Shinto god or goddess that has been enshrined in a shrine. And they take it very seriously. So every time you go there as a tourist, you will see other tourists, but you will also see Japanese people who are either tourists because they visit a shrine which is important in their belief system, or because they really want to pay worship and homage to the enshrined deity or to the Buddha. And so Miyajima Island is such a place, and actually the word Miyajima means shrine island. You can stay overnight. For us, that was a bit weird. We didn't really see that we would want to stay overnight, because there are just, essentially shrines that you can visit, which is great. There are also deer that you can feed, which is maybe also great. I don't know. But I wouldn't say that it's got enough going for it to stay a night. But when we went there in the morning, you can then have the whole day there and then go home in the evening and have a brilliant day out from Hiroshima. Now, things that you should visit are the Itsukushima Shrine. It's beautifully built and situated, and most of it is actually built on water. When we were there, we didn't see the full tide coming in. So basically, the parts of the shrine that are usually on water were basically not on water, but there was just basically some trickles of water there. When we were there, of course, when we first arrived, the whole torii was still in water. But when we then descended from the mountain, and I'm not kidding you, we saw the torii completely out of water, and that was, in my opinion, the more precious sight even. Itsukushima Shrine is a living shrine and it's a working shrine. So basically, when you are there, you may actually witness ceremonies being held. And of course, you are not allowed to take pictures of that. And you will also see the shrine office, which is where people go who want to enlist the services of the shrine. So, for example, something like a christening. It's not a christening, it's not a baptism, but the Shinto equivalent thereof. But also, of course, marriages, not funerals, because funerals are strictly Buddhist. So Shinto is for births and marriages, and Buddhism is for the normal people, is for deaths. If you are the emperor, then all of these will be done through Shinto, because of course the emperor is, according to legend, the direct descendant of Amaterasu, who is the sun goddess and a Shinto personality. So the Itsukushima Shrine, when you look at the relevant websites, will tell you that this is the best and most important part of the place of Miyajima to visit. And yes, it is impressive, but because of its situation and location on the water. And if you've ever played Fatal Frame, it'll remind you of that a lot. However, we actually enjoyed Daisho-in Temple a lot more. Daisho-in Temple is a Buddhist temple which has been built at the foot and, well, not really the foot, because we did have to climb, so a little bit into Misen Mountain, which is the central mountain of the island. And there's also a there's also a ropeway that you can take and go up to the summit, which we didn't do because we just didn't have the time. But we absolutely recommend that you do it, because I believe you would have a spectacular view. And I personally enjoyed Daisho-in Temple a lot more. And I will say this at this stage in the podcast. Generally speaking, when you visit Japan, especially if you go to Kyoto, you will see so many shrines and so many temples that at some point they will all blend into each other, because they are very, very similar. It's a little bit like churches. They are also very, very similar. When you go to a Catholic church in one place and then another and then another and then another and then another, they will at some point become very samey. However, it is our experience that the ones that are most spectacular are the ones that have been built in mountainous areas. And I'm not saying that the Kyoto shrines or even Asakusa Shrine in Tokyo are not spectacular. They are. But we felt that a place of worship in the mountains is usually a lot more serene, and it is a lot more beautiful to look at. That's personal preference, which is why we spent a lot more time in Daisho-in Temple, not only because you have to climb up to it, and then the temple itself is basically arranged in terraces, if you like. So you have to walk from one terrace to another, to another, to another, until you reach the top. And so basically the time it takes you to get there is a lot longer. But also you usually see more in Buddhist temples than you do in a normal Shinto shrine, because the shrines are pretty unspectacular. Sometimes the building is very interesting, like in Itsukushima, or the Itsukushima shrine, because it is built on water and it is quite a large shrine and you can walk around in it. But by and large, they are a lot less adorned than Buddhist temples. And yeah, they are also, the ones that we visited tended to be a lot more crowded. Itsukushima definitely is, because of its beautiful location. Lots of people go there to get married there. So you have lots of Japanese people checking it out, making arrangements, but also because it is the site on Miyajima to visit. We would actually recommend the Daisho-in temple a lot more, because it is, in our opinion, the more beautiful one. You can also use the walking trails, because there are trails that will take you up to the mountain. There's also a historical museum. There's also an aquarium. We didn't visit those because we weren't feeling up to it on the day, because we were a little bit sickly and kind of felt exhausted. But Miyajima is definitely worth a visit. Getting there and going home wasn't especially expensive. I want to say something like, I don't know, maybe 1,000 yen all told, which is about €6.30 or $7 US to get there. It is very, very inexpensive. And when you take the cruise ship, you also see the beautiful coastline. You don't see a lot of the coastline at all if you take the JR ferry, because it basically just takes you across the strait, what I call the Miyajima Strait. I'm pretty sure it's got a different name. And it's only a 10-minute journey, and it's just basically a very, very quick ferry ride, and not necessarily the most interesting one. But you can also say, okay, I'm going to take the quick one in the morning and then take the cruise ship home. But if you do, and this is very important, the cruise ship, you will have to book. You can either do it on the day before if you are in time, because I want to say that the booking booth closes at 1700 hours or something. So basically when we arrived on that first evening, we were too late. So we went there early in the morning and we said, okay, we'll see if there's a crossing that we can book within a reasonable time frame. So if it says, okay, well, you can book a crossing at 11, which would take us to the island by 12, we would have said that this is too late. We would have taken another, a different ship from a different port. But we were lucky that we only, I want to say, had to wait like 15 or 20 minutes. And it's a real cruise ship like the ones that you, river cruise ship like the ones that you might see in France or in Berlin, you know, the ones with the big windows, and you're basically seated so that you can look out. And the ferry back is really just a ferry. It's even a car ferry. Once we had left the island, we took a tram, which basically was quite interesting because we were on a trail, on a track that was parallel to the Shinkansen. So we could see the Shinkansen pass by on one side, but we could also see a fairly rural part of Japan as we were passing through it. And it was very interesting because you could see what it looks like when people don't live in the big cities. Because, of course, like Tokyo and Kyoto and Osaka, Hiroshima is quite a big city with a lot of large skyscrapers, and also, people don't usually live in detached or semi-detached houses, but they live in blocks of flats. But there you could see the more rural side of this part of Japan. once we were back, we spent another day in Hiroshima. Basically, we went to the art museum there, which was brilliant. It had both Japanese Western painting. It's a style of painting which is not influenced by the Japanese tradition, but influenced by the Western tradition. They also had Japanese paintings, and they also had lots of paintings by Van Gogh and Monet, etc. So it was not too big, not too small. I want to say we spent easily 3 hours in there. Then we had lunch because it was also a rainy day. And then we went to the Memorial Museum, which I've already spoken about, because we basically only had 2.5 days, I want to say, in Hiroshima. We'd only basically allowed for a short time, because there are lots of things you could do if you had a car, because a lot of the things that are interesting are north of Hiroshima on the other side of the mountain, but you really need a car, or you would have to get on an organized trip, which we didn't do. And so we had only a couple of days in Hiroshima. And on our first day, we walked around and explored the city on foot. On the second, we went to Miyajima. And on the third, which was a rainy day, we went to the museums. And then on the fourth day, we took the train back to Kyoto. So we took the Shinkansen to Kyoto. And that is where we will meet again in the third part of this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, or if you want to get more information, just leave a comment. Talk to you soon. Bye.